Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a couple of seconds to let all of our attendees join, but thank you so much for being here. And we can't wait to get this conversation started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Molly Mathias, and I am the manager of mentoring and inclusion programs at Chicago Innovation. Thank you all so much for joining us today. It is so great to be here with you all to celebrate Women's History Month, the power of allyship, and the resiliency of women. I have the great honor of leading Chicago Innovation's Women's Mentoring Co-op, a mentoring program for women innovators and leaders in Chicago. And through this program, I have seen firsthand how powerful allyship can be for both our personal lives and also for our careers. And I'm looking forward to learning from our wonderful panelists on all the ways we can continue to be strong allies to one another. I want to give a special thank you to Accenture for Chicago Innovation's sponsor, Accenture, for partnering with us on this wonderful event, and also to all of the Women's Mentoring Co-op sponsors, Flatiron School, Wintrust, Active Campaign, Accelerated Growth, CBRE, Cigna, Xylotech, and Horizon Therapeutics. We couldn't do this work without you, so thank you so much. After our panel discussion, we're going to open it up to an audience Q&A. Please submit your questions using the Q&A box and not the chat feature, so that way we can keep track of them all. So once again, please use the Q&A box. And now I would like to turn it over to two of my wonderful colleagues and true allies, Luke Tannen, Chicago Innovation's Executive Director, and Tom Kosmarski, Chicago Innovation's co-founder. Tom?
Thanks so much, Molly. It's so wonderful to be here with all of you today.
I couldn't agree more, Tom. It is truly an honor to celebrate Women's History Month with this amazing group of panelists and people. It's the people here today who really make Chicago Innovation a truly special community. And this is one that started small 20 years ago when Chicago Innovation was just a one-night award ceremony, but has since grown to a year-round community of nearly 37,000 people who come together for monthly events and participate in our three key programs: the Women's Mentoring Co-op, Chicago Student Invention Convention, and Ageless Innovators.
And Chicago Innovation continues to be very dedicated to innovation is for everyone. You know, that's our vision. And it's one that we've had for a long time and are very committed to. You know, we started the Women's Mentoring Co-op back in 2016 with 25 great women, and now the community has grown to be more than 600 women that have participated in this.
But we do know that more needs to be done to help ensure that women can be in greater positions of power and leadership. And so we're looking forward to learning from all these fantastic panelists here today, seeing what else we can do alongside our wonderful sponsors to really strengthen our collective impact.
And we're very thankful for our sponsors at Accenture. Shivani Vora is a managing director and chief innovation officer who's really focused her past 20 years on digital disruption and really leading global initiatives. She's also on our board of Chicago Innovation and is just a true innovator and thought leader in this field. Shivani?
Thank you, Tom, for that warm introduction. And a big thank you to each and every one of you for joining us today for this important conversation. For the last few years, Accenture has been honored to be a key partner, as Tom mentioned, with Chicago Innovation Team in furthering innovation within our Chicago community. We've taken several steps together to put Chicago on the map as a truly innovative city, and some new exciting news as well coming up soon. And a big thank you to Tom, Luke, Molly, and the entire Chicago Innovation Team, not only for this continued partnership, but also for setting up this session today. Now, as you all know, inclusion and diversity in the workplace is not a new topic, but it is now more important than ever. This conversation could not be timelier, as there have been countless reports where we have seen women, especially women of color, being disproportionately displaced in their careers due to the pandemic. Now, while we celebrate International Women's Day and Women's History Month, change and impact should not be limited to just a month. Accenture has just announced an important partnership with the Mom Project, where we will work together to employ mothers, create new research, and make Accenture hopefully one of the most flexible and inclusive work environments for our people. To discuss this and engage us in this lively conversation, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Tanara Schneider. Tanara is Accenture's North America practice lead for leadership and culture. Over the past 25 years, she's been equal parts organizational designer, business strategist, leader, advisor, product designer, harnessing her passion to make systems of all kinds success for people. She's passionate about helping clients navigate their readiness for change, culture shifts, and business growth while developing human-centered experiences, whether they are B2C, B2B, or B2B2C. Prior to her current role, she led the design practice in the Midwest and was the North America lead for Fjord, working at the intersection of business, technology, and human potential. With that, over to you, Tanara.
Oh, thank you so much, Shivani, for that warm welcome. It's always so much fun to get to cross paths with you. We used to see each other so much before the pandemic, just wandering the halls of 500 West. So it's lovely to see your face. I can't imagine a more meaningful way to wrap up what has been a pretty intense, I think, Women's History Month, and certainly should not be relegated to a month or to International Women's Day. Shivani, you mentioned the disproportional impact on women and women of color. The statistics are pretty staggering. One that I recently read was that the economic impact of what is happening to women, and especially mothers in the workforce, amounts to about a potential $64 billion impact in lost wages and economic activity. I don't know any other way to say it, so I'll just steal a quote from a sociologist, Jessica Calarco, when she said, "Other countries have social safety nets. The US has women." So I'd like to invite some really amazing women to join me and have a conversation about what happens now that we start to slowly open the world back up. How do we focus on supporting women? How do companies do it? How do leaders do it? And how do we as a support system, as allies, do this? I think it's really incredible that we have these three women at the table. Some I have actually met recently on other panels. Some I am meeting for the first time. So without further ado, let me introduce them so we can get this conversation going. Super excited. First, I'd like to introduce everybody to Felicia Davis. Felicia is the president and CEO of the Chicago Foundation for Women. Through that work, she leads the strategic efforts in investing in women and girls as catalysts, building stronger communities for all of us. She is a leader. She has been in public service for the majority of her career in a variety of ways, and she exemplifies what leadership needs to set out to do. She's a fantastic role model for me. Certainly, I fangirl. And really, some of the more impressive things, she is a Leadership Greater Chicago Fellow, founding member of the Chicago Foundation for Women's Southside Giving Circle, and she has blazed trails and continues to do so. I would love to welcome Felicia. Felicia, can we see your lovely face? There you are. You're on mute, my friend. Say hi.
Thank you for having me. And I fangirl over you, so this is great. But I didn't realize the feeling was mutual.
Oh, it's totally mutual. Let's welcome another amazing woman, shall we? Jennifer Fry. Jennifer is the program manager for Mom Success at the Mom Project. How cool of a title is that? Mom Success. I would appreciate that. I'm a mom. I'd like to be successful. She has served in various marketing communication roles throughout her career, including government, education, financial services. She has got all sorts of paper, a master's of science in communications from Walden University, a BA from Central Michigan University. She loves watching TV, as we all have, hopefully spending time with friends, out having brunch again as we open this up, and spending time with her husband, Greg, and her daughter, Aria. Jennifer, welcome to this conversation. So excited to have you with us.
Hi, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And last but not least, my colleague, Paula O'Reilly. Paula is a managing director leading our financial services business here in the Midwest. She is a transformational leader for women and for our young folks coming up in the organization. She has recently taken over our presence in Columbus as well. Paula, you're doing all the things. You are a board member of the 2020 Rise Up Academy. You are empowering women in leadership roles in financial services. You serve on the board of directors of the National MS Society. And you also participate in something that I think is pretty interesting, something called Pelotonia, which is a fantastic fundraising vehicle through cycling, right? That raises money. And Girl Scouts and Girls on the Run. You are doing all the things. Paula, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
It's going to be fun. So, amazing group of women. Let me start off by asking each of you, if you would tell me a little bit about what Women's History Month has meant to you, and maybe how that's a little different this year than it's been in the past. And let's just go in reverse order. Paula, you first.
So, I do feel more this year that it's taken on the whole month. And I like it. I appreciate that we're celebrating for a whole month. So I would start with that word celebration. And we kicked that off with International Women's Day. It's a celebration. So with all the things that we're going to talk about today, there's going to be some things we want to change and things we want to do better. But I also want to bring the celebration into it of everywhere where we have come, all the progress that we've made, and how can we continue that? But to your point about the pandemic, we've taken a step back. And how do we recover from that step back and continue that growth, continue that progress? But let's not forget to celebrate the progress that we've also made.
That is a wonderful point. Folks who have joined us, if you would, while the rest of our panelists answer this question for me, tell us in the chat how you are celebrating, to Paula's point, Women's History Month, and what else might you be doing or bringing extra special attention to? Jennifer, what about you? How are you celebrating Women's History Month this year, and how is it different?
Sure. And I just want to piggyback off of Paula. It's definitely a celebration. This month is like the time for me where I'm often reflecting on our past and our present and our future. And with me having a daughter, I'm definitely celebrating me and my whole self as a woman, showing up for my young daughter who will be 3 in a couple months, but also wrapping my love and embracing the women close to me in my life. Sometimes we're big on celebrating these huge giants that have come before us, but we can do that and also celebrate the circle of women that we interact with day to day. And I've really been doing that this month. How it's been different, of course, this pandemic, it's hard for us to love on each other like we usually do, and especially as women, and having our brunches and the meetups and all the sisterhood moments that we usually do. But I really have been doing that differently, and virtual is the way to still carry on those traditions. And so really been wrapping my arms and embracing my circle virtually, safely, and in these new settings like we're meeting today.
That's awesome. Felicia, why don't you bring us home?
Yeah, so for me, I feel a lot of joy, incredible joy at the resilience of women. When I was a little girl, there was a jump rope song, I think, or some kind of a thing used to sing it. It's about making $1 out of 15 cents. You used to jump to this tune. And it feels like this whole year was how women make $1 out of 15 cents. Okay, we can talk about the pay equity issue because yesterday was, but I digress. And so I marvel at the power and the resilience of women been on the front line, and it makes me so incredibly thankful that I see myself in this chain of like a long line of amazing women who've come before me, and my role and responsibility. And I feel this connection to all the women, all of us right now in this big moment that we've had this year. So this Women's History Month, right, makes me understand like that link from very early women and the struggles that they had to present day, and like this connectedness that kind of runs through all of them. So I absolutely think it's a celebration. I think we've had some really, really high highs. We've also had some lows, but all of those things really give us an opportunity to celebrate. So that's where I am with it, Tanara. Thank you.
I love it. And I'm loving some of the stuff I'm seeing in the chat, right? We're all finding these ways to keep it going. It almost feels like to really keep us almost embedded a little bit in the moment and in the celebration. And even, I'm seeing things like educating myself and others on the amazing history, right? Talking about keeping it connected to the history, looking at where we've come, thinking about where we're going. So let's spend a minute on where we are, right? Women's History Month, we know we got a lot ahead of us, but let's talk about where we are, because I'm curious from your points of view. There's a lot of statistics, right? We know that this moment has disproportionately affected women. So I'll throw them out, and I would love to hear from each of you kind of which statistics really are concerning you the most or sit with you the most as we think about where we need to go from here. So just a few, right? Black and Hispanic women are like, we're seeing 9.7%, right? Unemployment considerably lower or higher unemployment numbers for Black and brown women. The net loss of jobs, 5.4 million jobs lost net for women in December, or as of December. January was the worst in 33 years, right? So we're seeing some pretty disturbing things, plus that $64 billion number that I shared. And I am sure you guys, because some of you are way more steeped in this because of the work that you do, what is concerning you the most? Jennifer, let's start with you. What's concerning you the most about this moment?
Sure. I think as identifying with the group that's been impacted as a Black woman and a mom, and I know here at the Mom Project, we've done our own research and continually do our research there, in which we hear virtually all the time from women about how the pandemic has impacted them and forced a lot of women out of the job market. I just want to add on to those stats. I know last month, our Research and Insights Division, Work Labs, released a study based off of moms of color and what it meant to be a mom and during the pandemic. And at least 61% of moms across all industries, across all demographics, had to take a career pause. And so for me, I'm in awe. It's almost like, how do we move forward? Since the pandemic, no one expected that to happen, has like shifted us back almost 10, 20 years of work and effort and moving us forward. And so we're working with women all the time. I'm working with women, listening to women all the time to try to find the solutions to help us get back on track quickly, efficiently, and teaming with some other organizations to be able to do and make the impact that we know that we can make when we come together in making these changes.
Yep.
And for me, the thing I'm wrestling with is the 33-year drop in the lowest in 33 years for the women's participation rate in the labor force and the workforce. This is significant. It is the lowest point for 33 years. As we sit here, 5 million less women today are in the workforce than there were a year ago, for all kinds of reasons, right? Including caregiving, remote schooling, and also just being furloughed or laid off from their jobs. These are all tough choices, but to me, that number, the lowest in 33 years, means we have a whole generation, like we have a generation of gains that we've just lost. And I am concerned, right, as the economy opens up, are those women being called back first? Or, you know, and are you know, if you were had some seniority in an organization, is this an opportunity for employers to offload that seniority? And that means offload higher personnel expenses, perhaps, because you've worked there at a company for some time. So that's the thing that's troubling me the most. What does the workforce look like a year from now? What does it look like 5 years from now and 10 years from now because of this, you know, single big factor?
I'll pile on a bit, but on the opposite side of things that we don't see as much in the statistics, I worry about those statistics, very analytical, and you can process through those things. But what about the things that don't show up, like the mental health of women and the deterioration of, there's so many of us that are just barely holding it together. And it's okay. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the mental health. Moms who are trying to homeschool. So both women who have had the ability to stay in the workforce, that's great. The mental health that, you know, we've all taken a hit on. And then women who've had to opt out for you know, reasons that are perhaps beyond their control, and how their mental health is impacted by that. And then in the recovery, and, you know, if you aren't able to find the job that you think that you need, that you want, that isn't there, just a whole slew of mental health issues that I think are going to manifest themselves here in the next several years, that have to be part of our overall recovery plan.
So, two really big pieces there, right? So we've clearly got a disproportionate number of women who are not currently participating in the workforce. And we've got, Paula, to your point, the mental and physical toll that this is about to take for women who do choose to re-enter the workforce. So, Jennifer, I have a question for you that I'd like for you to lead off with, which is, how do companies start to better support women and working moms in this moment that maybe is different than the kinds of support systems we've seen to get women into the workforce or keep women in the workforce? What looks different from here forward that you think companies should be doing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I've had to take myself out of this, of course, and think of it from the larger standpoint, but definitely listening. That's a big key factor for companies, is to really listen to your employees, listen to what the needs are, what has happened, really do a deep dive analysis as to what's broken. And not by the choice of the individual, but just because of just the unexpected pandemic that has really uprooted the lives of a lot of women and have displaced a lot of women. And I think it kind of boils down into some more micro analysis when we talk about what does that look like? Well, some women have had across the entire career journey, whether they're entry level to C-suite level or beyond, people who've had to been forced to take career pauses and raise their children, to be caregivers during this time. We got to think about that. And I think that's where the mental aspect comes into, and really looking at incorporating processes, questions to take into consideration from these candidates that are wanting to re-enter the workforce, being innovative. What does that look like? Maybe doing some virtual interviews, looking at other ways and hiring processes that are more relevant to everyone's needs, to really take into consideration of moving everyone forward and not backwards. And it's the policy, and really looking into what benefits, what offerings does my company provide or is lacking that we may need to incorporate to help transition this group of women or people in general who have been displaced. And that would include everything from work schedules, offering flex time, childcare resources and benefits, career development opportunities, the mentoring and mentoring opportunities to get people connected and to be able to level up in their careers and make the best decisions for them. So I think it's a combination of things, but I really would strongly recommend that companies just do some listening, do some surveying, some polling to really understand the needs in order to develop the policy and the processes to help people transition back.
So let me tag on to that. And Felicia, for you, just from the perspective of the work that you do with Chicago Foundation for Women, what are you seeing nonprofits and the grantees that you work with doing to address some of these challenges too, that maybe we could learn from when we think about kind of the response from the private and corporate sector?
Thank you. So a couple of things, because the audiences, there are a couple of different audiences that nonprofits are serving. One, let's think about the sheer weight of what these frontline employees at nonprofits have had to do over this past year. And so those organizations have to first and foremost be tending to the needs of their own staff and making sure that their staff, I mean, to Paulo's point earlier about the amount of stress we're all under and resources, mental health resources and other resources, just the opportunity to decompress. So myself and organizations, or CFW and organizations like CFW, have been providing resources to help with that piece of it, which is really like, how do we help these frontline workers who are predominantly in the nonprofit space are women and women of color? How do we help them care for themselves? It's like on the airplane, put your oxygen mask on first before you put it on your children and others, and they're actually putting the oxygen mask on our communities. So how do we give those women an extra lifeline and support? So nonprofits are pivoting towards that. But the other thing that's happened is the realization that there's a lot more need than where people were giving or supporting prior to the pandemic. And I think the realization of how much the sector does. It's standing in the place of government. It's standing, depending on the organization, you could be standing, organizations are standing in the place of parents. They're standing, right? There's a lot of work to be done. And so changing, reducing barriers to get grant funding and support, creating new opportunities, increasing the best foundations and the best organizations did not divest this year, looking at their own economic losses. They've doubled down and adding additional capacity building, general operating support, and those types of things, so that those nonprofits, those organizations could actually expand their services. It was really expensive. If I just look at one part of our portfolio, if I'm looking at freedom from gender-based violence in the state of Illinois, domestic violence calls to the hotline have gone up 70%. When we were in severe lockdown, that meant that shelters were closed. And so the additional expense of those organizations to have to find hotel rooms and hotel beds and things like that as an alternative, which is a much more expensive model, but understanding that, then funders and organizations knew they had to pivot and to provide those resources. So some of it is supplying and supporting the workforce itself, so that this workforce that we all really rely on to do a lot of the heavy lifting in our communities, that they can sustain or are sustained to be able to do this for the long haul. And then operationally adding additional resources and support into communities across our region.
Thank you. I think that when I look at, to your point, how much of that community tends to be made up of women, and then you see the stress and frankly the water that women are carrying across the board. One of the things that I start to wonder is, one, how are we seeing, Paula, maybe this is to you, how are you seeing us react, clients, Accenture, other folks react, and what kinds of systems are we putting in place, or have you seen people put in place that give you a sense that we are either really paying attention or that are working well, that we might carry forward as examples of how we could start to confront this in a very significant way as we open things back up?
So the one thing I was going to say is a little bit of piling on to Jennifer's question about what can companies do and what are we seeing. I would start with number one is to not assume. So when you look at someone's resume, don't assume what you read is what you get. As a hiring manager, I'm thinking in terms of what is the best athlete, and that best athlete is about attitude, is about desire to learn. It's about wanting to be part of a purpose and doing something. I can train the rest of those things. So adding more training and this is across the board in a war for talent, of which we are starting to move into. I want the best athletes, and I want the opportunity to train those people in the specific skills that we need. So one of the hospitality industry has lost a lot of jobs. And are there ways I can take people who had a passion for serving people and turn that into something that's perhaps more digital and give them the skills and the tools that they need to be able to do that? And if we can do more of that and make an assumption on the front end that we need to do that and to support people, I think that that's is a great best practice to be considering. The good news for workers is we are moving back into a war for talent, and there are a lot of opportunities right now. So to me, it's equally about, I think the jobs are going to come back. They're just going to continue to be different jobs. And how do we ensure that our women, that our moms, that our people that want to be part of that productive workforce have the opportunity to get the skills and be retrained, reskilled into the skills of the new that are maybe more digital and less physical.
That's a really good point. I want to pick up on that. But first, audience, can we, I'd love to, if we could, Molly, launch our poll. We'd love to hear from you guys, kind of what your companies have done to assist folks during the pandemic. Have they taken steps? Have you guys taken steps? Are you seeing things in your own environments? That's encouraging. We've got some good stats coming out here that feel really good. So Polly, I'm going to part two that question for you. When you think about our role, the women on this call, but also folks who are listening, it looks like a lot of organizations are taking steps. How do we ensure, you mentioned mentoring, and obviously, the Women's Mentoring Co-op is about propelling women into leadership positions. How do we help? How can we take steps to pick up some of that action that you just talked about as we think about what comes next?
Sure. So there are things on the front end, like we just talked about, like what kind of training things are there? But as women are in the workforce and talking about succession planning and how we continue to advance women, I think is an important component as well. And just like I said, we shouldn't assume that they don't have the right skills and that we can't train them. We also shouldn't assume they don't want to advance, or they're not interested in this next role, or they don't have those skills and there's nothing that we're going to be able to do about it. So when you think about who's going to be the next you in your organization, I encourage you, to talk about it. Like, you thinking about it in your own mind isn't good enough. Like, have an official plan. Hey, these are the people that I think could potentially do my job next. And it should be a diverse slate of people. So, I'm not telling you should go out and find 5 women. I would love for there to be women on your slate, though. I would love there to be people of color on your slate, that it's a group of people that you're thinking about, hey, these people are up and coming. And if all 5 of them can take your job, fabulous. You've got some people to refer out to other people. So, and don't take someone off that slate because you think, nah, she's a mom. She wouldn't want to do that. She's got a lot on her plate right now. I can't add more to it. So I think it's as leaders, I do it myself. Like, oh, she's a new mom. She wouldn't want that role. It's not mine to decide. I have to punch myself, like, stop it, like, just go talk to her, have the discussion. And maybe it's not, and that's okay, but we have to have those discussions, that kind of unconscious bias sort of thing. But I would also turn it around as women, and as you get back into the workforce and you're loving your job, you also have to communicate, hey, I'm really up for this next thing, or I'm worried about my technology skills. Is there a way that I could work on that? Or is there a project that I might be able to do that's going to help me build those skills I think that I'm lacking? I think a two-way street like that with open communication, the more communication, the better.
Thank you for that, because that I think we sometimes do. I've heard those conversations, especially as we start talking about things that sort of land around this time. We're protecting. We think of ourselves as protecting women sometimes, or protecting folks from too much stress, too much responsibility, wanting to make sure that we are caring for women, but we do sometimes then put up unnecessary barriers to what is next for them. With that, I am actually really curious about something. We've been talking a lot about all the habits and the things that have happened during this last year because of the pandemic. And we have all certainly, some of us have opted for wearing really nice shirts on top and, sweatpants on the bottom. Some folks who got, are all deep in the Peloton, whatever it might be. We've all developed habits and rituals to adjust to the life that we've had now for more than a year. When we think about what comes next and the things that we may need to kind of undo or shift again, how do we support folks in the creation of yet another set of new rituals, especially as women are reentering the workforce? What could we be doing, or can we be doing within our organizations or as individuals to think about that change, that transition that's about to come yet again as things open up? So curious about your thoughts around that. Felicia, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I think of this as, I guess it's a nuanced on-ramp, right? It's not the traditional way, but we are all doing this reentry kind of together. And it is an on-ramp in a lot of respects. So I'm thinking the same innovation, the same sense of urgency or flexibility, every company has its different culture, the same exuberance that we use to pivot because the bottom line was at risk, because the country practically came to a stop. That same sense of urgency or whatever that impetus was needs to be present, continually present as this, on-ramp, and it may be, and I want to say this, no one should expect, and as I say this, I know a lot of people are already expecting it, that there's going to be, all right, we're going back July 1st, everybody's back 100% fully in the office, like as if nothing ever happened. And I think that's where grace and flexibility really will stand the test of time. And this is an opportunity too for women who are doing a traditional reentry to ask, what did the company do to support the question you just asked? What did your company do to support employees during the pandemic? And that will tell you everything you need to know about that organization and their culture, and the likelihood that they will provide supports and services and resources to help you, with this reentry. And I don't think it's going to be pretty because we still don't know what school will look like in the fall. I mean, we could go back this summer, and I think summer's a pretty safe time to go back because for the most part, kids are out of school. It takes a lot of things off of the plate of working women. However, but that is subject to change as the return to school happens. And that means, again, companies and organizations are going to have to be flexible. And so I don't know, Tanar, I mean, this is, we are all going through this in real time. This is, it's for everyone who studies, human dynamics or culture, company culture. This is fascinating. This reentry and how it happens. I'm sure there's a lot of research that will be written about it.
Paula, Jennifer, please pile on.
I'll double down. I totally agree with everything Felicia made in her comments there. And I know the beauty here at the Mom Project, we're completely remote. That decision was made. And so I know we're not the first company. There's been many other companies, even last year, who've made the decision to just fully go remote, drop the lease, all the things, and and we're still working through what that looks like, right? And so I am privy that although I'm coming and speaking on the page, in a place of remote life, that's not the life for everyone, will not be the life for most. And so with that, I think a couple of things, leaders again need to listen, start having those conversations now with your managers and your people's people, to really do the surveying and the polling and those genuine conversations about what the needs are for your internal team. Maybe there are people across the department that may not need to come back. And so that's a whole nother separate conversation, and you're equipping them with the right resources and the tools and the flexibility to do their job still. For everyone else returning, I think there needs to be some strategic plans laid out. But having those conversations up front are worthwhile. And for those who are looking to re-enter the workforce, I think this is the perfect time to really ask and connect with people in your network and beyond. Ask the questions about the culture. Do the research on the websites and see if there's new opportunities, flex work schedule benefits, childcare, huge. I know me and my husband are having these conversations now, even though we've been home for almost a year, but that's eventually a conversation we're going to have to pick up again and figure out what that looks like. Is that part-time having her here, or is that, her here full-time? It's those type of conversations that I think a lot of moms and women and people in general are having. But it really falls on the companies working together with our organizations to really make that magic happen and that transition flawless.
I'll pile on that. I agree with everything you just said, but I also then put on my other hat as I run a team of people, and I want them to come to work because I want us to be more productive, and I think that we need to. And so that finding that balance, I haven't necessarily been in that position yet, but I feel like it's coming where someone's going to tell me, no, I'm not coming in. And I'm like, well, then you can't be part of this team. It's not going to work. And how am I going to deal with that? No, you can't be on my team then. As I argue with myself I just feel like those scenarios are going to come up. And so how I'm trying to reframe my brain to think about it is why? Why do I need people to be here in person? Just because I want it is probably not good enough. Why do I physically need someone to be there? And if I can articulate that, then it's different. But very often it's more of an emotional thing. Well, because I used to be that way and I want it that way again. And I did this project before and we were all together and it was so great and it had the greatest outcome of all times. So therefore I want to recreate that. And I have to reframe my brain around, okay, I got to go a couple clicks lower. Really, why did we need people to be there in person? And I'm confident that there are some reasons, but I have got to be better at articulating them so that I can talk to somebody around why I want them to be there in person. Perhaps I'm going to convince them this is why, and you do need to be there. But with notice, we need to do that. And then I have the added complication of my clients and what my clients want. And I hear this a lot from my people that they're like, well, you're great and you're super flexible and I like you. But then I go and I work for my client. They have no interest in my dog barking. They have no interest in my child crawling into my lap. They have no interest in the fact that I have to get dinner on the table because I'm good with all those things. That's fine. My dog barks. My kid comes in. I have dinner that has to get made. But yeah, when I share that with my own people, great. With my client, it's not right. They're paying a fee for the service we're going to deliver. So I realize I just rambled here on for a bit, but it's in the same continuation of there are a lot of things that we need to work through on both as an employee and what do I need and communicating that, but as an employer, as a leader, what am I going to need from my employees, and how do we keep those lines of communication open so I don't feel as a leader like I'm being taken advantage of. Yeah, no, I don't feel like getting dressed. I don't feel like driving my car today. I feel like staying in Florida for the next month, taken advantage of, versus this is my childcare situation. I am working through it. I can still be contributing and doing a fabulous job, but I need this in order to get to that, do the fabulous job. And coming and bringing those two things together in a productive way is going to take a lot of work.
Actually, Paul, that was perfect. And thank you for that. One, the vulnerability of sharing the conversation in your own head with us, because
I do talk to myself. I admit it.
But I think it's really easy for us to sort of give sage advice and not admit that many of us are having sort of two pieces of that conversation and sit in multiple seats of leader, employee, employer, friend, support system. So thank you for that. It's actually the perfect segue into our first audience question, which is from Vidhu. And the question is, what can folks who are not at leader levels, not at manager levels, do to help move the needle? How do folks participate in this system in a constructive way to help move the needle forward, for women, for colleagues, but especially as we come back to work?
And is that, so the question to me is very broad. So let me think about it in parts. Is it, are we moving the needle on the reentry or on the equity piece? I mean, Paula, I'm with you because I have the same thing in my head. What will my donors expect? They like those in-person meetings with lunch and so forth. And I've had the same thing. What happens when someone says, I don't want to come back to work? And what does that mean from an equity standpoint? Because over the course of the pandemic, 3 employees, myself included, have been going into the office, doing the work of other people so that those people don't have to go into the office. So what does that mean if we continue this practice from an equity standpoint, if some people come into the office and pick up duties that belong to other people? So part of it, I guess, to the question is having those conversations. How do we move the needle forward? I mean, some of this is, I've done some surveys already with my team to like get at this. And I actually, Paula, just based on something you said, I'm going to do another survey asking some other particular questions to dig a little deeper. So some of that is companies, I'm an employee, but I'm also the president, right? And so I can make a decision in my head, or I think I might understand. So those surveys really help. But if the employees aren't honest in the survey, then I'm making a decision based on, kind of like half false information perhaps. And then what I think the employees are saying to me, I make a decision to that end. And ultimately it's not the right thing because I haven't gotten kind of like that transparency that's really needed. So the vulnerability that Paula just showed, I mean, some of that is everyone at the organization is going to have to just be a little bit more vulnerable and a little bit more transparent about needs and values and those types of things, so that we could kind of, we could do a better job of, this is a delicate, it's not going to, as I alluded to, it's not going to be pretty. So do a better job of trying to thread this needle through the little bitty,
A little narrow.
that little narrow opening.
So I think it was a broad question, probably around many of these things, right? How do we as folks who maybe are not in a position to be able to really truly influence the outcomes? We may not be hiring managers, we may not be the decision makers, but how do we influence in multiple ways? So here's a part 2 of a similar question, maybe a little narrower, from Trina, which is, what is the best way to shine a light on the actual need for leaders who don't seem to get it? The ones who don't seem to think there's an actual need to support women in this moment, or think that women are complaining or want support that they are not owed. How do we help, and how do others help folks really see that, especially those who are in a position to help move the needle, make decisions, lead organizations?
So I can start you off on a little bit on the reverse side again of as an employee or someone who is returning to the workforce or is re-entering into a in-person situation. My suggestion is always here's my suggestion. I can't do X that you asked me to do, but I can do Y. Would that meet your objectives? It's when I get, I just sent out a big thing to a bunch of people, said, can you do this? And, please reply to me and let me know. It's completely optional. And it's interesting the responses I got, but the responses that just came back and said, no, I can't. Okay, I just sent a note that said that was fine, so I'm going to let that be fine. But I had several people who came back and said, no, I can't do that, but here's what I could do. I'm like, I accept. I want that. Yes, thank you. I will take that. And I had a handful of people that came back and said, yes, I will do that. But those folks, in my mind, in my judging mind, those folks that came back and just said, no, I have a different, it was an eye-opening, like, oh, come back with a no but, or even a yes but. And I can do a lot. I can do a lot with that. So I do think that will help open people's eyes. But then as the leaders, we have to be open to the no buts or the yes buts that, but here is my solution, and will that or will not work, which goes back to my talking to myself in that I need to have some criteria as to why do I want this to be the way that it is. It can't be an emotional thing. It has to be more specific, is how I've been thinking about how are we going to get back to some of that, normal.
That is wonderful. All right, I've got one last question for you as we wrap this up. This has been fun, and I could do this for hours, honestly, with you guys. As we close, a question: what are the cultural levers you might change to bring equity to all women? So mull that over for a second. And Felicia, start us off. And then why don't you, when you are done, popcorn it to one of our other panelists.
All right.
Thank you.
I talk about this a great deal, so I'm going to just try to shortcut it. So part of the conversation, and there was another question in the chat about men. So men, I'm talking to you because part of this conversation really involves, who are the majority decision makers in most organizations, who feels as if this is a zero-sum game for them, that equity or more inclusion is a zero-sum game for them. They are going to lose, and often that's men. So let me just say this to you. One, we already know in the research, if you want me to, I can give you, 50 resources to support this. The research shows that in most instances, women are not paid equitably. That means all women, not just the women you may work with. That means not just the women you may supervise and how much you pay them compared to the men on the team, all women. That includes every woman that that you also care about. So this inequity in the companies and in organizations, this theme of inequity that exists is hurting all of us. It is hurting you too. It is hurting our economy. There are billions of dollars in GDP that are not being realized because this inequity exists. That means you're not buying that new house. You're not being able to pay for the education. You're not being able to take, vacation. You're not saving for retirement, college savings for children, so forth and so on. All of those things that we would do with our 20, well, for me, with my 37 extra cents on the dollar, all the things that we would do with that money to help our families and also to help our communities. And so part of that is the realization that this equity issue is men are in, and men have to be in this game as well. You are in this game and you are being hurt by it, whether or not you realize it. So I want you to be an ally and to support the efforts wherever you are in your organization. And I'll turn it over to Paula.
I'm on a similar path, but a little bit less on the equity and the dollar side. I want everyone to think that diversity of thought brought to a problem produces better results. That's what I want the culture to think about. I want to be part of a culture that looks at a room, or in our case right now, a screen, and sees a bunch of white men and says, whoa, we are not going to come up with the best answer right now because we don't have a diverse group of people working on this problem. And until everybody feels that way, until there's a diverse group of people, gendered, ethnic, you name it, diversity, solving the problem, we're not going to get to the best answer. And I want to be part of a culture that recognizes that and then does something to fix it. All right, Jennifer, off to you.
I agree with both of the ladies here on their comments. And I would just say last is how to become an advocate, working on the advocacy behind just championing women and moms in the workplace and supporting them regardless of what their decision is for their career, whether they choose to be the part-time worker or the full-time or just a stay-at-home mom. You know, we all have to do our work to support women, to listen to women, to encourage women, regardless of where they want to be or how they want to live their lives. And when we talk about our careers, that's where the transitions, where for most of us, especially who are moms, where sometimes we have to pivot out and come back in, and we have to make sure that the advocacy and the support, whether that's through organizations or within the actual, with the employer, that there are programs in place to help at each stage in the process of where women want to be in their careers and beyond. And so I would just end it on that note, that the advocacy part is a huge piece in bridging both of these parts that we've been talking about today. And I'll end it at there.
Thank you, ladies, so much. I don't know if that was a softball question, being somebody who focuses on culture and leadership. It was wonderful to hear that. When I think of the cultural levers you guys have all named, they fit very neatly for me into the fact that you can't design culture. You can only design the levers and the structures inside of an organization that help culture thrive or die. And these are some big ones. These are some very, very big ones. I will leave you all with my 2 cents on that, which is until we stop talking about the statistics and start talking about the actual power dynamics and the fact that having women in leadership positions who don't actually control your P&L, who can't control how you show up in the marketplace, we also won't shift the conversation. So I really, really genuinely appreciate you guys joining me for this conversation. And I'm going to turn it back over to our friend Molly to wrap us up. Molly, over to you.
Thank you all so much. I know all of the attendees will agree with me that that was just a wonderful hour, and I could have sat here for another hour listening to all of your wisdom. And I'm going to encourage all the attendees, send this to someone else in your network. I'll send out the recording, send this to your fellow employees, your boss, encourage them to listen because I know that they all can grow from it. Quick plug for Chicago Innovations Women's Mentoring Co-op. We're now accepting applications for our next cohort, which will begin in July. So if you're looking to get plugged into a network of strong women who are there to support one another, I encourage you to apply or to send it to someone else who needs that network and that advocacy and support system in their corner. But thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you again to Accenture for sponsoring this and to all of the Women's Mentoring Co-op sponsors. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Have a great day.